Patrick Rishe is the director of the Sports Business Program at Washington University in St. Louis. Thanks ever so much for coming on the program. Why do you think she's been cleared to compete after failing a drugs test?
Well, the only thing that I can think of is the fact that you have this test. If she tested positive, it was back in late December. And whatever was in her system, clearly out of her system by now, she's tested negative at the Olympics. But this all circumvents the issue, and the problem for me is, number one, if you test positive at your national championship, if that is to rule you ineligible for the Olympics, that's number one. But the bigger issue I have here is using age as an excuse. We understand that if you have someone that's younger, they may have issues and may not necessarily know all of the things that are going on, but their coaches, their nutritionalists, their parents, certainly they are literally the adults in the room that do have and should have better awareness. And I guess the other piece of this for me is that in this day and age, 14, 15-year-olds are a lot more savvy than we were when we were that age. And so I just don't buy this argument that we should be treating these particular athletes. Are we now going to treat 14 and 15-year-old tennis players, golfers, differently? And with respect to these things, it really sets a bad precedent, not just for sport, but obviously certainly for the Olympics.
So where does this leave the Olympics, the governing bodies, Russia's team, and the wider whiff of drugs hanging over sport?
Well, it still hangs over the Russian Federation, number one. And number two, what's really bizarre is they're going to let her compete. But if she happens to medal, they're not going to host a medal ceremony, because there's a chance that after the Olympics are over, they are going to look at this in more depth, and they could potentially even reverse this decision. This decision that was just made was only to let her compete in the remainder of these Olympics. But they're saying that because there's some uncertainty still that needs to be further investigated after the games, if she medals, they're not even going to have a medal ceremony. So whoever wins the other two medals, they're going to have to do some kind of, as they call it, dignified ceremony after the Olympics once they can settle this whole thing. It's just a mess that could have easily been resolved by saying, look, we are going to have to take you out of these games for these reasons. Giving her different standards because of the age factor, boy, I just have a real problem. It sets a horrible standard.
So, Patrick, if you were on the decision-making committee, who would you say should take responsibility, and what, if any, should the repercussions be?
Well, I think, again, you've got to look at everybody in her camp. And so perhaps whether it's the parents, the nutritionists, the coaches, all of these people, if this young person, again, we understand if you're a certain age, all of the people that I just mentioned are going to have a role in your life. So all of them should be aware of what's going on and could have been held accountable. Now, after the fact, after the Olympics are over, when there is more time to investigate this matter, as I'm sure there will be, then does the Russian Federation have to take greater responsibility, especially in light of the fact that they have a history in that country of doping scandals. But ultimately, I've placed the responsibility at the hands of not only herself, but her handlers, the parents, the coach, the nutritionist, whoever was involved with what this young woman was ingesting when she was competing.
The team committed. Well, Patrick Rishe, always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you. The director of the Sports Business Program at Washington University in St. Louis. Thank you.